Mom demanded I take sister's 3 kids after she abandoned them. When I refused, she showed up at my door screaming, blaming me for all their problems and called me a disgrace. I, 31M, haven't spoken to my mother, Carol, 68F, in almost 10 years. My father, Robert, passed away 12 years ago from a sudden heart attack. It was a shock to all of us, but especially to my mother. The cutoff with my mother, though, happened a couple of years after that, after a huge argument. The core of the problem was, and always has been, my younger sister, Brenda, 35F. Brenda had a baby young, at 22. I was 18 at the time, and just starting my own small landscaping gig, after working for someone else for a few years. It was tough going at first. I'd poured all my savings into it. Brenda called me one day, asking for a significant loan. She needed a car, she said. She had a part-time job at a diner a few towns over, and she needed a reliable way to get there and to take the baby, Lily, to doctor's appointments. The amount she asked for was almost everything I had left in my emergency fund. I'd just sunk a huge chunk of cash into buying a used truck and some new equipment, a commercial-grade mower and a leaf blower. I explained all this to Brenda. I told her I simply couldn't afford it. I was barely scraping by myself. I tried to be nice about it, suggesting maybe she could look for a job closer to home, or ask our mother for help. She got upset, saying I was being selfish. She said I always thought I was better than her. I told her that wasn't true, that it was just a matter of timing and resources. She hung up on me. The next day, my mother, Carol, called. She didn't even say hello, just launched straight into it. She demanded I help Brenda. She said family should always help family, no matter what. I was floored. I reminded her that just a year earlier, I'd asked her for a small loan, maybe a quarter of what Brenda was asking for. I needed a specialized piece of equipment, a stump grinder, to take on a bigger job that would have really helped get my business off the ground. She'd turned me down flat. She'd told me, and I remember her exact words, "You need to learn to manage your own finances, Michael. We can't always be bailing you out." I repeated those words back to her. I asked her why it was different for Brenda. My mother started yelling, saying I was being disrespectful and that Brenda's situation was an emergency. I said that needing a stump grinder to expand my business felt like an emergency to me at the time. We went back and forth, the argument getting louder and angrier. I finally snapped. I said some harsh things. I told her she always bailed Brenda out, no matter how irresponsible she was. I said she was enabling her, and that Brenda would never learn to stand on her own 2 feet if everyone kept rescuing her. I accused her of playing favorites. My mother hung up on me. And that was it. We didn't speak after that. 10 years. Not a single word. I'd see her at family gatherings, weddings, funerals, but we'd avoid each other. It was awkward, but I felt I'd said what needed to be said. Brenda has always been, to put it bluntly, a mess. She's had a string of bad relationships, one after another. She never held down a job for long, flitting from one low-paying gig to another. And she had 2 more kids, both boys, Mark, 7M, and Sam, 4M, each with different fathers. Neither of those fathers are in the picture at all. They never were, really. Brenda has always relied on our mother and, occasionally, when they were feeling generous, on the kids' fathers' families, for support. My mother, despite her limited income after my father died, always seemed to find a way to give Brenda money or help her with childcare. About 2 weeks ago, my phone rang. It was a number I didn't recognize. It was my mother. It was the first time we'd spoken since our fight. Her voice sounded strained, different. She didn't waste any time with pleasantries. She told me Brenda had disappeared. She'd left the kids with my mother, saying she was going to the store to pick up some milk and diapers. That was it. A normal errand. She never came back. A few hours later, my mother received a text message from Brenda. It was short and brutal. It said she couldn't handle being a mother anymore and was leaving. She said she knew the kids would be better off with my mother. She blocked my mother's number immediately after sending the message. My mother tried calling back, of course, but it went straight to voicemail. My mother sounded panicked. She told me she was overwhelmed. She's getting older, and taking care of 3 young children, especially with their different needs and personalities, is a lot, physically and emotionally. She also said that while she has some savings, a small retirement fund she and my father had set aside, supporting 3 children long-term would wipe her out completely. She wouldn't be able to afford her own living expenses, let alone the costs of raising 3 kids. Then she asked me the question I'd been dreading. She asked me if I could take the kids. Not just contribute financially, but actually take them in, full-time. I live with my girlfriend, Sarah, 32F. We've been together for 3 years, and we're very happy. We're planning on getting married next year. We've talked about having kids someday, but we weren't planning on starting a family for a few more years. We have a 2-bedroom apartment in the city. It's comfortable for the two of us, plenty of space, but it would be extremely cramped with 3 more people, especially young, active kids. I told my mother I couldn't do it. I explained about the apartment size, how it just wasn't physically possible. I told her Sarah and I weren't ready to be parents, that it wasn't something we'd planned for or were prepared for. I also, perhaps a bit coldly, pointed out that my mother has a large house, the house I grew up in, a 4-bedroom place in the suburbs. It's a bit dated, but it's spacious. And Brenda's old room is still empty, exactly as she left it. I said I could understand if she wanted some financial aid, but I asked for what, she flat out refused. My mother started yelling again. It was like the phone call 10 years ago all over again. She accused me of being selfish and uncaring, of not valuing family. She brought up the fight we had, saying I was still holding a grudge, that I was using this as an excuse to get back at her. She said I was abandoning my family, just like Brenda had. She kept repeating, family helps family. That's what we do. Then she said that she wouldn't even ask for help, if the situation was switched. I told her she was right, I would have no other choice than calling Child Protective Services. I then hung up. Now, my mother has been calling my aunts and uncles, her siblings and my cousins, telling them I refuse to help. I've received several calls and text messages from relatives, people I haven't spoken to in years, telling me I need to step up and take responsibility. They're saying I'm being heartless, that I'm turning my back on my own flesh and blood. Ida? Update 1. Okay, I've read through some of the comments, and I want to clarify a few things. A lot of people seem to be asking similar questions. First, about my relationship with Brenda. Like I said in the original post, we were never close, even when we were kids. She was always getting into trouble, skipping school, sneaking out, arguing with our parents. I was the opposite. I was the good kid, the quiet one who stayed out of the way, got good grades, and did what I was told. We just didn't have much in common. We didn't have any shared hobbies or interests. I remember one time, I tried to teach her how to play chess. I thought it would be a fun way to bond. She got bored after 5 minutes and started throwing the chess pieces around the room. That was pretty much the story of our relationship. I haven't seen her or the kids in years, not since before the falling out with my mother. I sent Christmas cards with gift cards inside for the kids for a couple of years after the big fight, thinking it was a way to stay somewhat connected, but I stopped after I never received a thank you, not even a text message. Second, a lot of people are asking why my mother hasn't contacted the police about Brenda's disappearance. She refuses to. She says she doesn't want to get Brenda into trouble. She keeps saying Brenda is just being Brenda, that she's probably just overwhelmed and will come back when she's ready. I think she's in denial. I pointed out to her, during that initial phone call, that Brenda might be in danger, that something bad might have happened to her. My mother just brushed it off, saying Brenda was a grown woman and could take care of herself. Third, and this is a big one, I did call Child Protective Services myself, after a long talk with Sarah. I reported Brenda's disappearance and the fact that the children were with my mother. I didn't mention my refusal to take them in. I just gave them the facts, Brenda's name, the kids' names and ages, my mother's address, and the date Brenda disappeared. They said they would do a welfare check, to make sure the kids were safe and being cared for. I haven't heard anything back from them since. Sarah and I have talked a lot about this, obviously. It's been a huge stress on both of us. She's been incredibly supportive. She agrees that taking in the kids isn't feasible for us right now, not with our living situation and our plans for the future. She did suggest that we could offer some limited financial help, maybe set up a monthly payment to help with groceries or the kids' clothes, something like that. But that's the extent of what we feel we can do. I've blocked my mother's number and the numbers of all the relatives who are harassing me with calls and texts. It's been quiet since then. Update 2. So, it's been about 2 weeks since my last update, and things have escalated. My mother showed up at my apartment building today. Unannounced, of course. I was outside, doing some yard work. It's a small apartment building, only 6 units, and I've kind of taken on the responsibility of keeping the landscaping looking decent. I was trimming the bushes along the walkway to the front door, trying to get them to look somewhat symmetrical, when a car pulled up to the curb. I didn't recognize the car at first, it wasn't my mother's old sedan. It was a newer model, a small SUV, probably a rental. I kept working, figuring it was someone visiting one of the other tenants. Then I saw my mother get out of the driver's side. My first instinct was to run. I literally started walking quickly towards the front door of the building, hoping to get inside and lock the door before she could reach me. She called my name, Michael. Stop right there. We need to talk. Her voice was loud, sharp, the same tone she used to use when I was a kid and had done something wrong. I paused at the door, my hand on the doorknob, and turned to face her. I didn't say anything, just looked at her. I told her, keeping my voice as level as possible, that I wasn't going to change my mind about taking the kids. I told her she should just go home, that this wasn't going to accomplish anything. She didn't even acknowledge what I said about the kids. Instead, she started talking about our relationship, about how things had been between us since my father died, and even before that. She said she knew she hadn't always been the best mother to me, that she'd favored Brenda, that she'd been too hard on me and too lenient with my sister. She said she was scared when my dad told her that she was pregnant a second time. Scared because of the Fineses. She told me that I was an accident. She went on to explain that having a second child had completely derailed their plans for the future. Before I was born, they'd had this whole vision of how their lives would be. My dad, who was a skilled carpenter but worked at a local factory, dreamed of quitting his job and starting his own woodworking business, building custom furniture and cabinets. He'd even started drawing up plans for a workshop he wanted to build in the basement of their house. My mother, she said, had always wanted to be a stay-at-home mom, to grow a big garden, raise chickens, and can her own vegetables. But when she got pregnant with me, unexpectedly, they realized that their dream was financially impossible. A new baby meant another mouth to feed, another bedroom needed in the house, and less money coming in if my dad quit his steady job. New businesses, especially something like woodworking, take time to become profitable. He couldn't take that kind of risk with a second child on the way. So, they shelved their plans. My dad stayed at the factory, working long hours at a job he increasingly disliked. My mother, instead of staying home, took on part-time work, cleaning houses and doing odd jobs, to help make ends meet. She said they both felt trapped, resentful. She admitted, and this was the hardest part to hear, that they'd both, subconsciously, started to resent me for it. She said it wasn't my fault, that I was just a baby, but that the feeling was there, nonetheless. She said that's why she'd always been harder on me, why she'd always seemed to favor Brenda. Brenda represented the life they'd planned, the life they thought they were going to have. I represented the life they ended up with, the life they felt they'd been forced into. She apologized. She said she was sorry for not being the mother I needed, for not giving me the love and support I deserved. She said she'd carried this guilt around with her for years, and that it had only gotten worse after my father died. I stood there, listening to all of this, completely stunned. I didn't know what to say. It was a lot to take in. I literally had to sit down on the steps leading up to the building entrance, my legs feeling weak. I'd always suspected, deep down, that I wasn't a wanted child, that my parents had preferred Brenda. The age gap between us always seemed significant. After a few minutes of silence, just sitting there, trying to process everything, I finally spoke. I told her I needed time. I told her I appreciated her honesty, but that I needed time to think about everything she'd said. I asked her to leave. She didn't argue. She just nodded, and walked back to the car. She didn't say anything else. I went inside, straight to my apartment, and told Sarah everything. Update 3, I sent my mother a text message later that day, after talking it through with Sarah. I didn't want to have another phone conversation, and I definitely didn't want to see her in person again. I needed to put my thoughts down in writing, to make sure I said exactly what I wanted to say. Here's what I sent. Mom, thank you for coming by today and talking to me. I appreciate you explaining things, and being honest about why you treated me the way you did. I understand you had your own reasons, but it doesn't change what happened. It doesn't change the fact that I grew up feeling like I was second best, like I was a burden. I can't just forget years of feeling like I wasn't good enough, like I wasn't loved as much as Brenda. I know you're in a tough situation with Brenda's kids right now, and I feel for you, I really do. But I still can't take them in. I'm not ready for that kind of responsibility, and it wouldn't be fair to them, or to Sarah and me. We have our own lives, our own plans. I need some space to process everything you told me today. It's a lot to unpack. Please don't contact me again for a while. I'll reach out when, and if, I'm ready. I didn't get a reply. Not a word. Which, honestly, was what I expected. Update 4, it's been a week since I sent the text message to my mother. She hasn't tried to call, text, or show up at my apartment again. I honestly thought she would. This evening, Sarah and I were cleaning up after dinner. We were just finishing up, putting the leftovers in the refrigerator and loading the dishwasher, when there was a loud, insistent banging on the door. It was my mother. She looked furious, she didn't wait for me to say anything. She just started talking, her voice raised and shaking. I told her, trying to remain calm, that I wasn't going to talk to her. I reminded her of the text message I'd sent, how I'd asked for space, how I'd said I would reach out when I was ready. My mother said she'd read the text message multiple times, that she'd thought about it all week, and that she'd decided I was being completely unreasonable. She said she'd apologized, that she'd explained everything, and that should be enough. She accused me of being selfish, of only thinking about myself and my own feelings. She said my father had worked his fingers to the bone at a job he hated, a job that had ultimately contributed to his early death, all because of me, because I'd come along and ruined their plans. She said I owed them, that I owed her, for all the sacrifices they'd made. She brought up Brenda again, saying that at least Brenda had a reason for abandoning her children, that she was overwhelmed and struggling. She asked me, her voice dripping with sarcasm, what my excuse was. What possible reason could I have for refusing to help my own family? My mother kept going. She said I was a cold and heartless person, that I'd always been that way, even as a child. She said the text message I'd sent was ridiculous, insulting, and that she wasn't going to respect my stupid request for space. She said she was here to get this sorted out, once and for all, that she wasn't leaving until I agreed to take the kids. I tried to interrupt her, to tell her she was being unfair, that she wasn't listening to me. But she just talked over me, her voice getting louder and louder. Finally, I snapped. I couldn't take it anymore. I told her she was the one being ridiculous. I said her apology, her explanation, didn't erase years of neglect and emotional pain. I told her that I didn't owe her anything. That she'd made her choices, and I was making mine. I said that if she'd respected my request for space, if she'd given me time to process everything, maybe we could have talked things through eventually, calmly and rationally. But that she'd ruined any chance of that happening by showing up here and attacking me. I reminded her that I had been very polite. I told her she had no right to dictate how I should react, how I should feel. I said that if I needed time, I was going to take time, and she couldn't force me to do anything I didn't want to do. I told her to leave, to get out of my building, or I would call the police. She stood there for a moment, staring at me, her mouth open. Then she started cursing at me, calling me ungrateful, a terrible son, and a disgrace to the family. Finally, she turned and walked away, back to the car she'd arrived in. I slammed the door shut and leaned against it. Sarah had been standing behind me, in the hallway, watching the whole thing. She hadn't said a word. After I'd calmed down a bit, Sarah spoke. She said she was glad I'd stood up for myself, that I hadn't let my mother bully me. She said she'd suspected, from the moment my mother showed up the first time, offering that apology, that it was all a manipulation tactic. She said she thought my mother realized that with Brenda gone, I was her only option, her only hope for getting someone to take care of the kids. And when I didn't immediately agree, when I asked for time, she'd panicked and resorted to anger and accusations. Sarah said we'd made the right decision, that we couldn't let my mother's problems become our problems. She said it was sad, but that sometimes, family is more trouble than they're worth. Update 5. It's been several months since the last update, since that awful confrontation with my mother. I haven't checked this Reddit account in a long time. Life has been busy, in a good way. First, the fallout from the fight with my mother. A few days after it happened, I received a call from a lawyer. It was my mother's lawyer. He informed me that my mother had decided to revise her will. She was writing me out completely. Everything, her house, her savings, whatever possessions she had of value, would go to Brenda and Brenda's children. I told the lawyer, honestly, that I didn't care. I told him that if my mother thought that cutting me out of her will was going to hurt me, she was sadly mistaken. I'd never expected anything from her, and I certainly didn't need her money. I haven't heard from my mother directly since that night at my apartment. I have, however, seen some posts on social media, from my aunt, my mother's sister. Vague, passive-aggressive posts about how some people abandon their families, how they don't appreciate the sacrifices that were made for them. I've ignored them. I've blocked my aunt and a few other relatives who seem to be siding with my mother. Then, a few weeks ago, I got another unexpected phone call. This time, it was from a police officer in a town about 2 hours away from where I live. He said they'd located Brenda. She'd been living there, working at a small diner under a slightly different name. The officer said Brenda had agreed to return and take custody of her children. She'd apologized to my mother, saying she'd been going through a severe emotional crisis, that she'd felt overwhelmed and unable to cope. She'd needed to get away, to clear her head. She was now living with my mother and the kids, back in the family home. I didn't really know what to say to that. As for Sarah and me, we're doing well. We're still planning our wedding, which is scheduled for next spring. We've booked a venue, a small vineyard just outside the city. We've chosen the caterer, the photographer, all the details. It's been a lot of work, but it's also been exciting.